Hi, this is the first video on relative risk, and in this video we're just going to try to give you an intuitive understanding of relative risk. In the next one we'll talk about how to calculate it from a 2x2 table. Okay, so we're going to start out with an example, and here we've got 20 people, and 8 of these people have heart disease, and the heart disease is indicated by the red dot. Okay, so there's our 8 people with heart disease. And we have 7 people among these 20 who smoke. Okay, so that's indicated by these people smoking here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so what we want to know is whether smoking is related to heart disease in this group of 20 people. Okay, so that's what relative risk can help us do. So by calculating a relative risk, that'll help us to see the extent to which a particular exposure, such as smoking, is related to or associated with a particular outcome, such as heart disease. Okay, so in this case, we're using smoking and heart disease, but it could be anything. So for example, you can see here that I used a gender stereotype and put longish hair on some of these figures. So you could say those are women, okay? And so you could also look at women, the relationship between gender and heart disease too. So you can really look at any exposure, even in the same population, and how that relates to really any outcome. But in this case, we are looking at smoking and heart disease. So the way we calculate relative risk is by comparing the incidence of the disease outcome in the exposed group to the incidence of the disease outcome in the unexposed group. So in this case, the exposed group is smoking, because smoking is the exposure that we're looking at. So we want to say, what is the incidence of heart disease in the smokers in this population versus the incidence of heart disease in the non-smokers in this population? And so that is what relative risk is looking at. Is the relative risk is the ratio of disease in the exposed group to the incidence of disease in the non-exposed. Okay, so here we've separated the 20 individuals in our population into exposed and unexposed. So the exposed are all the smokers, and the unexposed are the non-smokers. And so now what we need to do is calculate the incidence of the disease, of heart disease in this case, in the exposed and in the non-exposed. So we remember how to calculate incidence. So for exposed, the incidence is the number of people the number of cases of disease, right? So that's 4. So we'll say incidence is I, and then sub E for exposed. So incidence in exposed equals 4 cases of heart disease over the total number of people who are at risk, which in our case, in the exposed group, is 7. Okay, so it's 4 out of 7, which equals 0.57. So the incidence in exposed group here is 0.57. And now for the unexposed, we want to just do the same thing. So we'll just say incidence in this case we're going to call it a 0 because it's 0 meaning 0 exposure. So maybe that's a little confusing, but that's how people often indicate it. You could also say a U, I guess. So you can see it in different ways in different books. But either way, you have incidence in exposed and you also have incidence in unexposed. So what is the incidence in an unexposed? It's the same thing that we did over there. So it's the number of cases, right? And which is 4 here. 4 over the total number of people at risk. And in this group, the total number is 13, because we had 20 total people. We have 7 in our exposed group. So we don't even have to count. We can just say we have 13. Okay, so 4 out of 13, which equals 0.31. So now we've got the incidence in the exposed, 0.57, and the incidence in unexposed, 0.31. And the relative risk is simply the incidence in exposed over the incidence in unexposed. I'm going to use a 0 there, which in our case is 0.57 over 0.31, which equals 1.84. So that shows that the smokers have a 1.84 times the risk of getting heart disease than do the non-smokers. So relative risk is just the ratio of the incidence in the exposed group over the incidence in the unexposed group, which dividing the incidence in exposed by the incidence in unexposed gives you the relative risk, which is the relative increase or decrease in risk among exposed relative to unexposed. So if the relative risk is over 1, it means the exposure results in increased risk. If the relative risk is under 1, it means that the exposure results in decreased risk. And if it's equal to 1, that means that there is no effect of the exposure on risk. Okay, so this video gave you an intuitive sense of what relative risk means. And in the next video, we're going to look at how you calculate it using a 2x2 table. Okay, so see you in the next video.